Joining me right now on Beyond Fringe, I am sitting down with Shetan Noir. Welcome to the show, Shetan. How you doing tonight?
I am doing great.
It's great to have you here. I want to thank you again for coming on. I know when we first spoke, it was in reference to me doing an actual interview for you virtually, and I was very excited to do that. And I wanted to return the favor, and I wanted to bring you on because I, from what I gather and see, you have a very interesting background and perspective in cryptozoology and what these creatures are. And it would be really good to hear some of your insight on a lot of this. So I want to thank you again for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, and it's wonderful. I it's interesting how things work out, and I got an interview from you, and now you're getting an interview from me, and it's a wonderful way to network and get to know people, and also to put information out there and to learn information.
And I think that's an important perspective to take a look in considering with what cryptozoology is. And for you, I want to ask you, where did it all start for you, crypto wise?
So for cryptids now, I'm not too much into the UFO stuff, but I am getting more and more because of the magazines that I write for. But mostly for me, it was before cryptozoology had a name. We were all becoming well aware of the Bigfoot phenomenon and Loch Ness monster and stuff like that. And so for me, this adventure started cryptid wise. Paranormal, it started a few years later, but cryptid wise, it started when I was, I think, about around 9 years old. And as it would have, like many families here in the Midwest, our family vacations were camping. Camping every other weekend, just everybody would get into the vehicle, and we had one of those pop up our campers, and at one time we had one of those truck campers that you just slide on the back of a truck. So this one particular summer, we were going to this one campground called Crystal Lake because they had a very beautiful crystal clear lake, and it was very good for fishing. But at this campground, now picture it, you're a 9-year-old child from Michigan, and not knowing the ways of the world and everything that's in the world. um, there's certain things that take you by surprise. And for this one, they had a 5 foot, or maybe it was bigger or smaller. They had a 5 foot alligator in a dog kennel with a cement pond at this campground. Now, as a 9-year-old child, you can only imagine that I'm thinking that they, caught this thing in the lake and made it their pet, and now it lives there. So if that's possible, then sure enough, one of the weekends that we were there for the family fun night or enrichment night, they were showing movies, and two of the movies that they decided to show were one, the Patterson Gimlin film, and two, the Legend of Boggy Creek. And so, as a 9-year-old child sitting there and watching these, I'm like, okay, so you're telling me they have alligators here, and now there's these big hairy creatures running around in the forest, and they're going to get me. And so I very clearly remember being in the women's bathroom and being too terrified to venture out of it. And these two older ladies were kind enough to help me find our family's, camper. And so that really is what started my piqued my interest in my imagination on what are these other things out there in the woods that are actually real. We all young kids, we always, oh, unicorns and dragons and stuff like that. And those are more mythological creatures. But the idea that these Bigfoot, these Sasquatches can be out there in the woods and they're watching you, or these lake monsters can be in the lake and you might actually get eaten by one. There's so many different scenarios where cryptozoology, it fills in, it's like water, it fills in the spaces where nothing else goes and gives us, more things to ponder.
I could see vividly as a kid being terrified of the Legend of Boggy Creek and building an insight in my head thinking, wow, they really mobilize these Bigfoot creatures as monsters. So I could see at a young age developing such a mindset of belief and wonder, but also one of terror too. I mean, Legend of Boggy Creek is a very interesting movie or documentary, in a way, as well as the Patterson Gilman film. I mean, that's the notorious Bigfoot footage that kicked it all off in the late
Yes.
20th century. But uh, as a kid, though, when you see films like Legend of Boggy Creek, did that also pique a lot of interest and kind of build a mindset that other creatures out there could exist of that nature, or did it build more fear about what these
I
things
think
are?
I think a little of both. I mean, you've got this film footage, and being a 9-year-old kid, going from watching the Patterson Gimlin film to watching The Legend of Boggy Creek, they both had that grainy film quality, and without knowing the backstory behind each one, um to a 9-year-old kid at that time, we're not talking 2000s, we're talking back in the early 80s, and not having the backstory of where each one was filmed at and what the scenario was behind it, but visually seeing the Sasquatches in both films, it just that really ingrains in your 9-year-old child mind, and you're like, whoa, uh if that thing can do this or that, then man, we're in a camper, it's going to knock the camper over. And so, and it didn't help that people said, oh well, that's just on the south, or on the Pacific East Coast, you don't have to worry about that here. It's like, okay, but there's still alligators, and you can't reason with a 9-year-old child that the alligator that's in the dog kennel is didn't come from that lake, so that's just not going to fly.
There was a large 8 foot or 10 footer alligator that was spotted in a New York sewer a while back, and you talk about like these normal animals that we know in nature and how large they are in size. And I can even see back then, even too, it being a more bigger shock because of the culture and it not being as notable or at least somewhat known back then. And that also makes me want to ask too, how was it like in your area with people with the Bigfoot culture? Was there interest in it? I mean, if there was interest to play these two films at this area, this camp, then there had to be some sort of fascination with it back then, or was it more hidden?
It was more hidden, and I think the idea behind showing the films there was, somebody probably got bootleg copies of it and just thought, oh, this is really cool to show tonight. And I had never really heard of the Bigfoot before. And so it wasn't until I was a little bit older and I started getting issues of Fate magazine that I started realizing, oh, there is all this different stuff, and then you're trying to watch every little TV show that has any little bit of cryptozoology or mythology in it, and then kind of weeding your way through what's fact and what's fiction, or what's possible and not possible. And so it's not until you as a human being are growing and learning how to do proper research into things that you start to make connections and connect the dots and see, oh, okay, so a lot of people, I would say, the Bigfoot awareness didn't really start happening until the late 90s, and then coming into 2000s, it became much more popular, and now it's almost like if you haven't had a UFO or a Bigfoot or a paranormal experience, then you're kind of the odd person out, and that's how I am seeing it more and more. Some people will still be like, oh no, we don't talk about the paranormal stuff like that. It's like, really? Really? Because I'm sure you've had a paranormal experience, but you just want to be, sheltered and shuttered about this but that doesn't make it go away. They're still out there in the woods. They're still haunting, the house, or they're still flying through space. And it's not until you get people to actually talk about their experiences that more acceptance, comes about, and people really start to comprehend these things.
I agree with that. I know with a lot of people, I often open up to them and throw out the idea that, listen, I'm not here to get a quick buck or a view out of your interviewing you. It's to understand and hear what you have to say, and also to get it off your chest. I have a lot of time too with a lot of eyewitnesses when I explain things, because yeah, even now it's tough to even have people come out. You have people who are talking about their experiences that occurred back in the 70s, and they're finally
Hmm.
talking about it now in the 2020s, and it's tough. And the podcasts, while they do help, I know it also generates the idea of what these things could be. And I kind of see it as a factor of how we move forward in cryptozoology and how we explain it. Because some people might see these things as one way, or one others might see them as another. And I want to ask you, what do you believe a Bigfoot is in your opinion?
So I honestly believe that the Bigfoots, Sasquatches, are a flesh and blood creature. But I also think there is the ability there for, if, because we do come across reports where people say it was there and then it wasn't, it was gone. And I do think in those situations, we might be looking at a residual haunting of sorts, where, maybe the Bigfoot was, dying of old age or had a heart attack, because we do know that heart attacks are not just, humans aren't the only ones who have heart attacks. Mammals of any kind have heart attacks. Dogs have heart attacks, horses, primates. So I have to believe that the Bigfoots are not immune to having a heart attack. And that's a very sudden way to die without a creature really knowing, what happened to itself, or possibly, being in a territorial, dispute. You might have two males or two alpha females who go at it, and one is badly injured and killed, and you have the replay of that, through events and through time. So I do believe that the Bigfoots are a natural flesh and blood creature, but just like human hauntings, I believe that the Bigfoots can be a haunting of their own. And that could explain a few of the eye sighting reports that people get. But I do think that, more often than that, we're dealing with a flesh and blood creature, that just chooses not to interact with us. And if we do see them, it's either being in the right place at the right time for us, or the wrong place at the wrong time for them.
I agree. I always thought Bigfoot as a flesh and blood creature, and not just by what you described, but also just by going from reports of people who have seen it, tracks. I've always felt if something is natural, that it would leave its mark, whether it's tracks, hairs, and even the structures too. I feel something that would be abnormal wouldn't do those type of things, particularly because something abnormal would want to stay hidden. Even with Bigfoots and other cryptids, yes, they want to stay hidden too. But naturally thinking also too, I see it from scientific standpoint. And I think
Hmm.
that also goes in the past of how other cryptozoologists, before the whole paranormal aspect got into it, how they studied it. And keep in mind, as we all know, the 20th century, paranormal wasn't really a huge thing with a lot of cryptozoologists going back into like the early 40s to the mid 60s. It wasn't up until like we really started getting the Mothman phenomenon that we began to see somewhat connections with paranormal. But while there was minor discussions in the past, even before then, it was just like going back to how Bigfoots and stuff and other cryptids were talked about. It was very hidden. But I always think that they're flesh and blood. I just don't see that there would be something that would change it. I know that we go into the discussion of the cloaking or the discussion of the whole portal uh, debate, but it's very controversial, and I think it's also something too that for me, as somebody who likes to believe in first person, I could see myself encountering a Bigfoot, but I would really want to see if this was be able to go into a portal or suddenly vanish. We also
Hmm.
get that also in the Dogman field as well, but I see them as two different cryptids.
Yeah, they are definitely two different cryptids, but it's interesting when you're looking at wildlife and you're looking at Bigfoot and how it's able, some people say it's cloaking, some people say, it's disappearing into portals, but there, I live probably not even an eighth of a mile from the main road here in Michigan. And there have been times where looking out the back window of my house, I'm like, why does the ground look weird out there? And all of a sudden the deer raises up its head and I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even know you were there. You blended in because of the color of their coat, the color of the ground around them. They blended in so well that, and there was two of them. So I'm sitting here looking at two deer that a second ago I didn't even realize they were there. I just thought that something looked weird out the window. And then they raised their head up and I'm like, whoa, there's two of you there. So if a everyday common creature like a deer can blend in that well with its surroundings, then a Bigfoot, who I do think have a very high intelligence, um, I think that they have more than enough, intelligence and capability of blending themselves into
Everybody's so
any of the natural surroundings that they are, um,
Well, ladies.
used to being in. And I think that they can do that quite well to avoid human detection. And there's so many cases where um, animals and reptiles and fish have learned how to camouflage themselves and hide themselves in plain view to avoid predators and human detection. And it's something that we as humans kind of, take for granted until you're in that situation where it's like, okay, I know it's here, but where is it?
I That's a good point too about elevation and that type of cloaking, how it can easily be seen. It's also too with camouflage. I know when I've worn camo in the woods, I could be with a couple friends, and one of them wouldn't even notice I was in this particular area. I'd be so close in the bush, and it'd be so hidden. So it's very good with how the eye can play tricks. It's a matter of being in focus. And on par with Bigfoot, I do feel that in a lot of cases there is a certain way of their personalities and how they could be with human beings. I've heard a lot of cases where people have had regular interactions, non-verbal, but interactions where there's been nothing too crazy. People have seen it and then it walks the other way or through a car. There's also been cases where people have heard tree knocking and then there's intimidation, getting knocked and thrown out of the woods basically with these strange sounds. Do you think that Bigfoots are necessarily evil creatures, as some might say, or is that taken out of context and they have personalities like human beings?
I think they very much have their own individual personalities. And if you look at natural behavior, um, with any female animal that has young, except for maybe dogs, they are going to want to keep you out of any area that they're younger in because their primary focus is protecting their young. So I would, I would put this thought out there that, um, let's say that you're a young mother and you've got two small children with you and you are walking down the sidewalk in, or, let me rephrase this. Let's say that you are living out of your car in a very rundown part of a metropolitan city and you see, you know, a group of teenagers who are up to no good approaching your car, what are you going to do? Either you're going to blend in with your car and you're going to hide in your car and keep your kids as quiet as possible, or you're going to get out of that car swinging a baseball bat to keep those, chase those people off, because you are protecting your living area, your home, and your offspring, your children. And so the same analogy plays out with whether it's a mother, Sasquatch with her young children, or a black bear, or a wolf. Even birds will, aim for the head in hopes of getting you away from their nest. So this is not a new experience. This has gone on since mothers were having babies. The instinct is first to protect your offspring, and if you can't defend them, then get them to a safer place, by either chasing off, whatever is making the area unsafe, or doing physical damage to that. And so I don't think that the Bigfoots are, or any animal, or human, is good or evil, when they are just trying to maintain their way of life, protect their young, protect their territory that they perceive as their living area and their food sources. And as human beings, who are one of the most prolific reproducers of the planet, we should have a better understanding of what it's like to have your family or your home threatened by somebody else. And we should take that into consideration when we are going out into the woods, that we are no longer on our front lawns. Once you start walking into the woods, you are walking into, you know, the wilderness. You're walking into another species front yard. And we have to keep that in mind, when we do have interactions with any type of species. That one, what time of the year is it? Is it, birthing season? Is the food plentiful at this time of year? Because other animals are trying to make their living off of that, and it's up to us to keep that into consideration.
Exactly, and that's something that I often stress about to a lot of people who ask about, well, why do they chase us out of the woods, or why do they do these certain things to us as human beings? But see, I also feel that because when we're introduced to different aspects of social media and how these creatures are portrayed, I feel that that's the automatic instinct, that we think of them as monsters, or we think of them as evil because of these particular thing of these happenstances. But see, at the same time, when we look at zoological animals like bears, for example,
Mhm.
when bears go ahead and they attack a deer, it's part of nature. I mean, that's food source right there for them.
Yes.
And people would think, I think I give it as an example. It's like, well, if a Bigfoot does something heinous and it's something that's we've seen before in nature, but of course abnormal to some who are not familiarized, and they think it's evil. Well, is a bear evil because it kills a deer, or is a mountain lion terrible because it rips apart a beaver or a groundhog?
Right.
Like things like that. And it's just that type of contradiction. It kind of says to myself often, these things are not bad creatures. I don't think they're evil. I mean, I'm sure they do bad things, but I don't think they're evil. I think that they are their own creature with their own persona and how they present themselves. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to territory. It all comes down to protecting their young. I do believe
Mhm.
in that. Same thing with dogmen. There's always that thing that excalibrates all these type of possibilities, but I think if no different, why is a grizzly or a bear in general, why is it protective of their cubs? It's instinct, it's motherly instinct, but at the
Right.
same time too, it's territorial, as well. So I agree strongly with everything you've said, and I think you bring up a really good point about it, and it's something that is definitely overlooked, I think, sometimes in the field, because we're so used to being told in different outlets about how they're portrayed as, but a normal cryptozoologist, I think, wouldn't go down that route, is what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, if you know, if you look at aspects of nature, so is a great white shark evil for killing a seal and eating it? No, because that's what they do. Is a lion evil because it kills a gazelle and eats it? No. Is an alligator or a crocodile evil for, uh, you know, killing a fish, or a human being and eating it? No, because obviously the human was in their territory and became part of the food chain. And that's what people have to keep in mind is the Bigfoot, they're not after you as a food source, but if you as a human are taking their food source, yeah, that's going to tick them off. Especially because they have a cognitive ability that, for like a bear or a wolf, if they see you shooting, a rabbit or a deer and taking it, they don't really, it doesn't really bother them. But the Bigfoot is going to see that differently because they have a similar thinking pattern than to a human being. A bigger brain gives you a bigger potential for processing information. And so they are seeing hunters, kill their basically their food and take it. And that would be just like if one of us were to walk up to a farmer's field and say, "Oh, well, I like that, cow right there. I'm gonna take it right now and have steak for dinner." What do you think that farmer would do? He'd be coming out of his house with a shotgun and shooting at you. And that is, very similar in the principle of what the Bigfoots are thinking of. Hey, you're no, those are my deer, and why are you shooting them and killing them and taking them? That's my food. So, if you put yourself in that position of thought, then you can see where the Bigfoots would be, very territorial with human beings, because we take quite a bit, but we don't give, a whole lot back. And when we plant gardens or orchards or stuff like that, we're not thinking that, oh, we're going to give this to the animals. We're thinking, how can I make a profit off of this? And meanwhile, everything in the forest is coming in to eat the free food.
That's a good example as well. And I also feel that with a lot of the sources in how they behave, and it's no different with humans. It works both ways.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you this because this is probably the biggest mystery for a lot of us all. But in going into like a part two of what Bigfoot is, would you say that there is a connection to humans, or is it more of that connection towards the primates? Do you feel that, or is it a bit of
I,
both?
I, I think because, so if you look at the evolution of man, and you look at the family tree, it's not really a tree, it's more like a shrubbery, with branches shooting off in all different, directions. And once we think we have the timeline, fairly well planned out of when, each different, um, you know, species shot off in this direction, we find a new fossilized remain that says, "Oh no, we're not even scratching the surface." We might have some of the major players down, with Homo sapiens and Homo erectus and Gigantolopithecus, and these different species and subspecies, all having a different destination point on this, shrubbery. Um, but we don't have all the facts yet. So I think where Sasquatch falls off is he's a very intelligent primate who has paralleled human beings, um, keeping abreast of us and kind of paying attention to what we are doing as a culture and a civilization, but very much keeping to themselves and still continuing to develop and become more intelligent in their surroundings. So just like a Sasquatch would not do very well if you were to drop it in downtown New York, um, a human being wouldn't do well if you drop them in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains with no food, no water, no cell phone, just the clothes on their back and the shoes. Um, how long would it take them to get back to civilization? And would they get back to civilization? So, you have to compare those two. And, case scenario, like I was talking about before, when we walk into the woods, we're walking into somebody else's front yard, species and wilderness wise. But what is our reaction when the wilderness abruptly enters into our woods or into our lives? Um, ponder this: if a deer or a bear were to suddenly come uh, rushing into a mall, how would people react? What would the response be? The response would be someone would call 911, law enforcement would show up, and either they would shoot to kill or they would tranquilize it and then probably take it out into a wilderness area that the animal is not familiar with and release it. But we wouldn't at all be welcoming of the creature. And that's kind of, what we should anticipate when we go into the wilderness. And you should expect to be treated like that. None of the the comforts of home. You are in their element, and it would be just like if they came into a mall or a Myers or anything like that. Humans would react very hostily towards them because what is this creature doing in our civilization?
And that's a very good point too, because often there are enthusiasts who are very inexperienced in the woods who go into these places and expect that they're gonna be scared, they're gonna see something, and it's gonna be something great, but you're gonna be treated like a regular wild animal in the woods, and that's something
Yes.
that a lot of people don't take into consideration. Considering the fact if an 8 foot 9 foot creature is looking at you, and you do something that it doesn't like, but you don't realize it or don't come off in that way to you, they'll see it another way and chase you or do whatever. And it'd be something that's not it would be traumatic, but at the same time, it gives you an idea that it's not just it's basically like squaring up against a bear. When you see bear, you get terrified because these bears, how they think mentally, and what they see us as, they're going to see us as prey. And same with a Bigfoot.
Well, only the grizzly bears would see you as prey. And see, black bears are, and I actually, my mom is a black bear expert. She is the bear curator at the North American Bear Center in Ely, Minnesota. So bears, I have quite a working knowledge with because black bears, unless it is a mother who is defending her cubs, a house cat can chase off a black bear. They
That
are they are they don't stand their ground. They are I don't want to say wimpy, but they are very easy to run off. My mom has neighbors who are very elderly, and they chase off black bears with garbage bags. So that shows you, how easy the black bears are to chase off. Now, a grizzly bear that's a couple 100 pounds heavier and a much bigger animal that will definitely come after you. So, even within similar species, you have different behaviors. Um, it's like saying, oh, every dog is vicious. Well, no, you've got golden retrievers that will beat you to death with their tail as they're trying to get pet, and then you've got Doberman pinchers and guard dog types that will happily come up behind you and just bite the hell out of you, or Chihuahuas for that matter. So it depends on the species and the breed and the characteristics um, of the animal that you're dealing with. Not every animal is the same. Even within the primates, you have some primates that, as long as you are quiet and you are respectful for them, they don't care that you're there. But there's animals like the macaques that are found in a lot of these ruins that tourists go to, and they will steal everything off you. And if you try to get it back, then you're looking at getting bit. And if you show your teeth, they see that as a sign of aggression, and they will attack unprovoked. Um, like you're smiling at them, they actually see that as a sign of aggression and will, in your mind, it's an unprovoked attack, but to them, it is, it is you who started the fight because you showed your teeth. So even though you're trying to get back your belongings from them, they don't care. It's theirs now, and too bad.
Thank you for that insight too on the bears, because a lot of the cases I've heard about black bear, they've either attacked or charged at humans where I'm at.
So let me tell you this story, and it's a true story. Everybody who knows me or has been to my Facebook page has seen Tegan Gray. She is a 7-pound Harlequin miniature pinscher. She travels everywhere with me. And a couple of years ago, I had taken my mom up to Ely, and we got in really, really late. So we just left everything in the car and we went to the house. Well, the next morning, 6 a.m. is usually when I get up to feed everybody at my house and let the dogs out to go potty. So I have Tegan, 7-pound Tegan, on her hiking harness and on a 10-foot lead. And give her breakfast. And the night before, when we had stopped at the last gas station, I had grabbed some chocolate chip cookies, the homemade kind. So I have a chocolate chip cookie in my mouth. I'm grabbing my bags out of the back of my Ford Escape, and I hear behind me this, which is a black bear. Now I have already started to shut down the trunk of my car. It's one of the Ford Escapes, so it's already going down, and I can see in the window behind me it is definitely a black bear. Now I also have a hold of the end of the 10-foot lead that my miniature pinscher Tegan is on. So Tegan had also heard the, and she comes flying. She was in the front seat with the door open, eating her food. She comes flying from the front seat of the vehicle all the way around to the back where I am, goes 6 feet behind me, and is challenging the bear. And this includes her barking at it, her kicking her feet, her, doing everything she can to get this bear. The bear sees this little 7-pound dog doing this and freaks out and goes flying off into the woods. And I literally mean flying, because it jumped over a 6-foot tall hedge of shrubs to get away. And so by this time, my mom comes out and says, "Is everything okay?" I'm like, "Yep, just eating a cookie and chasing off bears." And so for my little miniature picture, that was thrilling. She chased off a black bear. For the black bear, it was like, "Oh crap, what the hell is that?" I didn't know they came in that size. And for me, it was like, yep, okay, this is another one that's going to go down in her diary of things that she's done. So this was a adult, black bear that she chased off. So 7-pound dog, one human, and a black bear, and the black bear took off.
That's pretty interesting story. The fact that a giant bear was that intimidated by a dog, and it's not the first time we've heard it before, but still it amazes me when a domesticated animal squares up against a wild animal, and how the wild animal is intimidated and runs away. So that's pretty interesting, and it's also a bit funny too, I guess, because of the fact of just seeing it. I've always seen videos, I guess, of domesticated animals always chasing bears away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty interesting to see, and that's a pretty cool story. I have to say, I'm really fascinated by that, and everything that you've said in reference to bears, and that you have this history on it, have expertise on it, because I feel that that's something that can also play into cryptozoology, having that type
Yes.
of experience. And
Especially when you're talking about Bigfoot, because a lot of the footage that I see, I'm like, okay, yes, it has a big rear end, but that looks more like a black bear to me. And a family member or a friend who is actually an expert on different breeds or species, then that really helps when you're looking at evidence and you're trying to um, decide, could this be Bigfoot evidence, or are we misidentifying a species? And so I look at a lot of, natural occurring behaviors in well-known species.
No, and that's very good too, because again, there's a lot of people who may misidentify things or go into the woods. I remember I've interviewed a couple people recently who even say that automatically when you go into the woods and people hear the first noise, they think Bigfoot, and they
Hmm.
automatically think that because this is Bigfoot's territory, that every sound that comes out, every sound that's made, if we don't hear any other movement in there, any other sort of nature, that it's a Bigfoot. And with footage and evidence, or at least photographs, I've always been on the fence with a lot of it, because there's those people who do hoax things, but there's also people who do have something, but it's not plausible because of the quality or because it just looks like something that could be hoaxed. But in the past half a century or more since then, has there been any specific piece of evidence that's always stood out to you, that's always been genuine Bigfoot evidence?
Well, I do believe that the Patterson Gilman film is actual footage of a Bigfoot. Um, I've interviewed Bob Giblin, and he seems very, very legitimate with his findings. I think people who try to disprove it or display it, I think they are not necessarily trying to prove or disprove the evidence, but trying to make a name for themselves by doing it. And really, you're sacrificing the integrity of some of the best evidence that has ever been found or captured of a living Bigfoot, just to make a name for yourself. But I will say I have had my own sighting, and nobody's going to convince me otherwise of what I saw, because of the details involved. Now, my sighting happened. It was actually I was actually coming home from the first time I had gone up to visit my mom in Ely, Minnesota. And um, we had gone up to, as a trip, we had gone up to Winnipeg, and spent the weekend up there. But we were trying to get home fast because there was a snow storm coming in. And it was Sunday, afternoon by the time we got back. So I really wanted to be on the road within a couple hours because the snow was coming in. So as I'm driving back to Virginia, Minnesota, to pick up the 4-lane highway, I get to the off ramp, and at this time I'm in my soft sided Jeep Wrangler Sport, and everybody knows, the 2-door Jeeps, what size they are. It's very comparable. They don't change a whole lot from year to year. So I was in, my Jeep, and as I come up to the on ramp to get up, take, from the 2-lane up onto the 4-lane, as my headlights are shining out. This is like 3 o'clock in the morning. As my headlights are shining out in front of me, um, I see now there's headlight, a very thick, furry leg, tall grass, another very thick, hairy leg, and then headlight. Now, where I'm sitting in my Jeep, which is the driver's seat, I'm 5'8". When I stood next to my Jeep, I was about, my head was about 8 inches taller than the top of my Jeep. So wherever the shoulders and head of this creature was higher than what my head was in the Jeep. Wherever the head and shoulders and upper chest of this creature are is above my Jeep. Now my Jeep is in motion at this whole time, so I probably got a good 5-second viewing of what this was. And it wasn't until I was up off of the on ramp and onto the 4-lane highway that I stopped my Jeep and thought, did I just see what I thought I saw? And so I sat there for a few minutes thinking I should go back down and look. And then realization hit, you are in a soft-sided Jeep, in the middle of nowhere. And if your Jeep gets attacked and overturned, who are you going to call? And so I thought, nope, I know what I saw. I'm just going to, I'm going to leave it be and let it do whatever it was going to do. And I am headed home, which was about a 14-hour drive.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting experience, especially seeing it not only in an area, or at least on a highway where you're going at a certain speed, and then at the same time to see this thing for a couple seconds. It must have been pretty interesting. And overall wise, when you had seen it, even though it was a short amount of time, were you able to get a good look at how tall it was?
Well, see, that is the hard part because I saw the legs and I could see where the kneecaps were. The kneecaps were just, where the hood of my Jeep was. They were just a little bit lower than that. So, but wherever the head and shoulders of this creature was, it was well above where my head was in my Jeep. So that would be, probably about the 5 foot, where my head was, 5 foot. So wherever the head and chest of this creature was above that. So I'm guessing it was probably a 7 or 8 foot, tall individual.
It's rather interesting, especially I know I interviewed an individual who had an encounter on a parkway and seen it going very fast speed, but it was white and had like a red like eyesight. So
Hmm.
it was interesting to say the least, but it truly was, it was pretty cool because it's like there seems to be some sort of idea, like despite like the hour gap is, how late it could be, there's something about these particular highways or parkways or freeways where they're engulfed too. And this is also in where I'm at, there's parkways and we have a lot of woods, so obviously the woods
Hmm.
are a source and they would cross over depending on how people might see it. I know that there was a case in Jersey where someone had seen it on the parkway going south. So it's struckly convincing when you see these type of things, and creepy at the same time. But following this encounter, did this also give you more interest in the subject of cryptozoology now that you had seen one?
Yes, and it was more or less um, it was a defining factor of me for me because it was like, okay, I've seen one now, and I can't deny it. And the area that this happened in, it is very like you won't see another car on the expressway for probably an hour. And so it was in, there's woods on all sides of it, and uh, it's about, I want to say, half an hour from the next town. And just, it's in northern Minnesota, so it's not like there's, a whole lot of people running around at 3 a.m. in the morning. And it wasn't a bear because this was the first week of November. Bears are already denned and, going into their hibernation state. They're in northern Minnesota. And it wasn't a moose because they don't have a whole lot of moose in that area. And if it was a moose, I'm pretty sure there would have been more damage, or there would have been damage done to my vehicle coming that close to it. Moose do not have the best temper. They have that huge rack on top of their heads, and they will use it to, hit things with. And so, if it was a moose, I would have to say that it probably would have, tried to gore or, gnash my vehicle, and that did not happen. I got a very good look at the legs. They were furry, not smooth and velvety at all, but very. Um, I would have to say, if you saw a Newfoundland dog that hadn't been groomed in a while, that's the appearance that this would have had. Very shaggy, reddish tint to it, but very dark, and very much getting its winter coat in. And it was there, and then I passed it, and I got that good look at it. I was only going maybe 15 miles per hour at the time, and drove past it and got up onto the on ramp, and that's when it clicked that I had seen what I had seen. It was like, um, I'm not going to go back down because I don't feel like getting, having to make that phone call to anybody of, hey, my Jeep tipped over and the Bigfoot did it. Because I don't think people would quite believe me unless we found physical evidence on the vehicle of some, like fingerprints or something of that nature. But that would have been a really interesting phone call to have to make.
That would have, and in general, I'm sure that for every party present, it would be hard to explain, especially to those who have to pick up the Jeep about a Bigfoot tearing apart the Jeep itself. Um,
Yeah.
Following this, did you ever return to this particular area? And
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
did you
Yeah.
by
I,
any
I
chance find
actually have to
anything?
go that way. Um, Not really, because when I did return, it wasn't until the next summer. So any evidence, would have been gone by then. But I go that way every time I go to visit my mom, because there's only really one way into Ely. And that is either from Virginia or from the North Shore. So you really, there's only one road that goes through Ely that connects to other major routes. And those other two routes they run north and south. So I go that way, you know, once or twice a year. And I always, have that in my mind of, okay, so maybe we'll see another one. And maybe this time I'll actually stop the car, grab my phone, take a picture, and then get the hell out of there.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Is like if there was any recent investigations, if you ever considered going into that area and investigating it and trying to find something, maybe not of that particular creature of that time, as times have far gone from now, but in general, though, from the idea of doing an investigation over there because of what could be there. So, yeah, that does sound pretty interesting hotspot though. See, I'm not too familiarized with that area, so I don't know a lot about the activity
Mhm.
or in general of the state. I do want to ask you though, moving forward from Bigfoot, I want to ask you about the Dogman a little bit.
Sure.
Particularly for the Dogman, is this a creature that is a flesh and blood, upright canine, or is this something supernatural? Because the Dogman creature seems to be distinctive, a bit different towards the Sasquatch creature, and it's been the biggest debate for the longest time. But in your opinion, what do you think this Dogman is?
So with the dog man, it's interesting that we do not have or have not found anything in the fossil record that says that this creature, started on Earth and has evolved since then. Now there are all kinds of theories and um, ideas about what dogman is, but they can also be on four legs, but they stay in a canine form. That is a dogman. A werewolf is a human being who turns into a werewolf that was born on the seventh year and is the seventh son, and it goes along with that folklore and superstition. Wolf man is a Hollywood creation, similar to Frankenstein's monster, the creature from the Black Lagoon, the Invisible Man, the Mummy, stuff like that. So, really, when we're talking about, it, we have to be definitive in what we are investigating. And if you're investigating the werewolf phenomenon, then you are investigating a human that turns into a werewolf, but is not a shapeshifter, a skinwalker, or a wendigo, because the skinwalkers are actually a shaman who has taken part in in a ritual and has focused on black magic in order to gain the abilities to become a skinwalker. A Wendigo is a possession, a spirit possession of a human host that turns the human being into a cannibal and has them doing, things where they're eating their fingers off or chewing their lips off, attacking and killing other human beings and eating them. And so there's several different very unique classifications for these creatures. They are not all one creature. They are distinct, they are separate. So people who want to muddy the edges and say, well, uh, it was this. No, no, it cannot be both. It is one or the other. And you have to look into and fine tune your investigation in your search parameters of what exactly you are investigating.
That's a great and I think very professional explanation of the distinctive difference between all of those categories: dogmen, wendigo, skinwalkers. Uh, because a lot of people do think, and I thought of it for the longest time too, of it being possibly something of a skinwalker or a dogman, or is a separate creature, but a skinwalker might mimic a dogman, partake. A shaman might change into the form of a dogman. Of that is what I used to get as an example. But also too, as time goes on, we change perspectives and our difference in theory become a bit different, because not just from what someone else might say, but because of some new discovery or discussion on it that could open up a new door, which creates this whole theory about them being demons or Nephilim, or being related to the Aztec gods or the hieroglyphs of the underworld with the Anubis, right? So you have so
Mhm.
many different possibilities, but I've always seen him as an upright canine, a flesh and blood creature, even though there's no record, as you said, about or any fossil about what they are, or the discovery. Like we've kind of
Yeah,
found what it's always been.
the
Go on. I'm sorry.
oh no, now the only add-on that I will put is that because we don't have any fossil records of the dog man, it is possible. And like I said, I'm just starting to get into the UFO and alien races stuff because of the different magazines that I write for. But it is possible that dog man is an alien race that has come here to Earth, and are either establishing, their own society here, but trying to evade human detection, or, there's any number of possibilities of, what the potential could be for a alien race like that to be here. We do know that there is mention of, the reptilians, which are a humanoid type figure, and people have seen those. Uh, Alien experts do believe, UFO analysts believe that this is one of the races that's out there. So there is the possibility that Dogman could be an alien race, and they are just here for whatever reason. And that is the only woo part that I would put with the Dogman.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add on to that, because you mentioned about the alien race, and I want to ask for your insight. I remember reading some reports and also talking to somebody who had had a dogman experience, but also had seen glowing, ominous, monochromatic, and cooler color lights in wood lines. And there was reports also of a bunch of campers who had seen these lights, and they were approached and almost attacked by dogmen. Could that be part of that alien UFO connection, or is that something entirely different on its own?
No, I think that is the case scenario that we're looking at, is if the dog man is not a natural occurring species here on Earth, then the alternative is they are an alien race. And this can explain very neatly um, the lights in the sky that are seen, when they appear, the fact that they can, disappear, um, basically within view of where you saw them and then where you think they would be, and they disappear. These could be an interdimensional alien being or race, and that I do give that some thought because it is possible. Um, as a as human beings, we can't be the only living life forms in the universe. There has to be other life forms out there. It's kind of foolish of us to think that we're the only ones. But having said that, you never know who are the good guys and who are the bad guys and who is just neutral. So, when we do encounter these different races, it's really, on a one-to-one basis of how they interact with us.
Should we fear them though, or should we?
I think instead of fear, we need to, because fear is such a detrimental reaction to experiences. So I think if we could become more curious and let curiosity feed our emotions instead of fear, then I think we would have the potential for learning more. Because usually when humans are in a fear reaction, we are usually defensive. We are usually we're going to make things much worse than what they could be. But if we go into it with a curiosity, I think that that gives us more of a potential for learning. And so I think if we could look at things from more of a curiosity and a eureka, discovery, moment, instead of a, oh, I'm terrified and I'm afraid. It's very hard to do. We all have those, those moments where um, you know, instinctually fear takes over. But I think if we could, start fine tuning that with a little bit more curiosity, I think, we'd be much more open to, uh, learning from these different races.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also feel that taking it with an open minded perspective, but not to follow what others might think, to build up your own insight as well. I think influence has been strongly used in cryptozoology to have others think of these same theories and throw out their original ideas because their idea might not be as plausible as this other person's theory. But see, I also think at the same time, it's a it's almost like it's a following type aspect where if someone tells us that we should fear them, we will fear them because that's what that one person said. But that's not, I think, the most appropriate way to go about it too, because instantly when we see these things, if in general, if we fear it, then clearly we set ourselves up to be prey in a way. There's a reason why we get chased out of the woods by them. There's a reason why they might have a quick standoff. I also think of it too as where if someone has an encounter with one of these things, they're going to have a very close standoffish type approach, very similar to how a dog might see somebody. I know a dog. I've had dogs in my life, and I've also had dogs that I may never known or maybe encountered before. But when I get to finally come across a dog, they will react very negative towards me. They'll jump and they'll be like, "Oh, who is this person?" It's an observation, it's an instinct, and I think a dogman would do the same thing. That's going by the flesh and blood standard. Now, thinking of it as an alien or a UFO race, um, that to me would be something that, if it is possible, then that would also explain, as you said too, with the lights. UFO occurrences there and there where people have had dogmen afterwards have been seen, and there's often been something with where there is more of a strength to them. I think if they were an alien race, they have more
Mhm.
intelligence than we do. Same with Bigfoot.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you have to ponder is, um, as human beings, are we the smartest things on our planet? Or
Exactly.
you know, because intelligence can be measured in different ways. Are we as smart as an octopus? Because an octopus can get itself in and out of a beer bottle, um, can also get the cap off of it. We can't physically do that, nor can we change our colors to suit our surroundings. And octopus and squid can both do that. So in that aspect, no, we are not as cunning or as intelligent as the octopus are. But we are certainly, able to catch them, which makes us a better predator. So there's different ways of measuring intelligence, and classifying, what is more intelligent, or a higher intelligent species. But do we, if we were to sit down and think, yes, we have, the Albert Einsteins, we have the Bill Gates of the world, who are very intelligent people. And as a human population, we do have some very intelligent, members of our society. But are we the most intelligent? If we have alien spacecraft who are visiting our planet, on a weekly basis, but we can barely get any spacecraft into outer space without them exploding or crashing or anything like that, then that kind of makes you take a step back and say, huh, yeah, we might have smartphones, but we don't have I mean, we have, our airplanes are great, but they can't go into outer space. And yet these spacecrafts that alien, races are using seem to be able to do it just fine.
And that's a good point as well, and a very good take on it is too. And it's something that I think needs to be acknowledged a bit more, so that way investigators and newcomers kind of get that idea that's crafted into what they are. And now I want to ask you this too, statistic wise. When we talk about people vanishing into the forest, we can obviously build explanations why. But I want to ask you, do you feel that some of these disappearances are applied to cryptids as well?
Oh, yes. I think there are a lot of different scenarios of why people go missing in the forest. Um, there are so many different case scenarios. Their thought is, I'm going to stage my disappearance and leave my old life behind and set up a new life somewhere else. So there's one, possibility. But then you have people who think, okay, I really got to go, use the restroom, and I'm just going to go off the trail a couple of feet. And nope, I can still see the trail from here. Let me go a few more feet, because somebody might come along. Okay, I think I'm in a good area, and they do their business. They get turned around, and suddenly they can't find the trail anymore. And then they're wandering around for hours, and either, weather plays a factor, or natural predators take a factor, or they injure themselves, and they fall down a rock, ravine or something like that, and then they're never heard from again. Or you have, the cryptid factor of, you don't think that anything is in this location. And this applies for Bigfoot all the way to mountain lions and wolves, um, you know, or anything in between. You're hiking along on a trail by yourself, and you are not the apex predator anymore. You are only the apex predator if you have a way of defending yourself and injuring and killing anything that actually attacks you. Otherwise, you are a prey item. And then we just have, weird anomalies where, um, people say that there's voids and portholes, and people sometimes walk through them and they're never seen again. And the hard thing about that is, once the person goes missing, you really can't get their story, or what happened to them. All we can do is form a theory of what happened to them.
Very good example too, because I know a lot of people who do go camping who don't have a lot of experience in the woods, who are very inexperienced. They don't know a lot of things about the woods, but they'll go with people who do have experience so that they have some sort of leverage when they're doing certain things. Now, for those out there who are inexperienced and they go solo and they can run into things, it's not even just Bigfoots or dogmen. There's also regular animals, depending on in whatever state somebody's in and what their national animal is and what it could be out there and what to do. And some people don't go into the woods. They go into the woods unarmed. They don't think about what could be out there, the dangers. It's very easy for someone to get injured. It's very easy for someone to go missing in these woods. Now, going on the contrary of being related to cryptids, I do also think that they could do things if you go deep into a place territorial wise that, yeah, you will go missing. There's also that common ground of protection. And there's also that ground, too, of why people do vanish without a trace. And even thinking of it naturally and just thinking about it cryptid wise, there are things that make me wonder as well what else can dwell the line in what's out there that people can go missing in. Not just Bigfoots and dogmen. There's other things too, and
Right.
also too. There's also been reports, I know by me. There's been cases of strange people in the woods, cults.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's so many different ways. I've also read a lot of disappearance reports of people who have gone missing for years, and that even people in different countries have said in certain hotspots, like, listen, you know, it's very easy to go missing in the woods. So all these factors play into it. But I agree with everything you've said and everything you've discussed really tonight. It's been so informative. I want to ask you, though, a couple of questions in reference to some paranormal. Uh,
Sure. Sure.
Paranormal is more relevant, I think, to be taken a bit more serious at times, considering compared to cryptids, because we've been followed with paranormal a lot, and there's also paranormal is more mainstream, I think, not just with media and how they've portrayed it, but in television and these and how things of movies, of books, and you know, we've had so much more interest with it, I think. But for you, paranormal wise, is it more? How is it like experience wise, being a paranormal enthusiast slash investigator? Is there more acknowledgement towards it compared to cryptids, or is it about just the same?
Talk to people all over the world. Now, we're here in the United States, the paranormal is accepted, and we have tons of TV shows about it. People are always talking about ghosts and stuff like that. In other parts of the world, it's not it's slowly catching on, but it's still kind of ignored, and not really. Nobody wants to talk about the ghosts in the attics, and for me, that's kind of moment of really, because here in the United States, you know there's like major paracons in every single state, and uh every night of the week there's a TV show on about ghost hunting with that a different team does, or investigating different locations. And so to me, I think for the United States, it's very, very popular, probably even into Canada and Europe, too. Well, Britain in places like that. But I think more and more people are acknowledging that it's not a question of if ghosts exist, it's why do they exist, and how did they, what is the reason for them to still be on our plane of existence. um I think that's the curiosity there, that people that that are into the paranormal, I think that's the question that we're all asking is how is it that you get stuck here? Because I think as a human being, we want to avoid that. We want to go on to the next great thing in our existence, and if it's being stuck here as a spirit, we kind of want to know what's the reason why, and how can we avoid that, or you know uh have fun doing it.
Yeah, I agree. I think paranormal has always been more curious with inquisitive discussion because of it being whether an apparition or a spirit or a shadow person, something that is paranormal that is hard to explain, but when we do see it, it's like cryptids. It leaves the hairs in the back of our head stand up, but we also have all these type of technical gadgets that we can pick up readings with. We can pick up some sort of paranormal activity with, and whether we follow it from the TV shows, but if someone actually picks up a device and you start to give out these readings, and you, whether it's a EVP or a spirit box or whatever you use, you have all these type of gadgets that pick up some strange readings, and of course with psychics and mediums who do connections with the dead. Now, has there ever been a paranormal experience that has stuck with you, or
Oh
an
yeah.
investigation that has?
So I have two quick stories that I will tell. Um, so the first one happened, or well, I don't know if it's the first one. So one of them happened. I was staying at a friend's house down in Southern Ohio because he lived close by to where the Mothman Festival takes place. So on the weekend of the Mothman Festival, me and a couple of other people were staying at his cabin, and I had my little 7 pounds of fury, my min pin with me. So the first night that we were there, we were all staying in the upstairs, and there's little alcoves. So there was me and another lady in the one alcove, and then a mother daughter in the other, and then there was a gentleman on the other side. And the staircase comes up in the middle of the room. So the first night, nothing really happened, but people were picking up on things of the cabin was haunted by a little boy. And so this was interesting information, but the next day was Mothman. So everybody was trying to go to sleep in preparation that we would probably be at Mothman all day long and would need our energy. So the night passes without, anything. Everybody gets up in the morning, and like a convoy, we follow each other back into um, town for the Mothman finding out. Because when I got there, the last tour for the bus tour was like 7 o'clock that night. So I had to wait till 7 o'clock to do that bus tour. So then I get back to the cabin and we have dinner, and everybody turns in for the night. So the woman who had been my roommate for the night previous, she had already left for home. So me and my little dog were the only ones in our alcove. And so it was a small, like off room, and there was two beds on each side of the wall, and then a nightstand in between, and then a rocking chair in between. Now, on the rocking chair, I had put my travel bag, and in the top of the travel bag, I had a bottle of ibuprofen. So just after I fall asleep, I get like this icy, weird sensation going through me. And it's about this time that I hear my little dog start to growl. Now she is in between me and the wall, and the rocking chair is behind us. And I hear the rocking chair move. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe, somebody got up and moved it. But then I start to hear the pills in the ibuprofen bottle rattle back and forth, and quite loudly rattling back and forth, as in something's moving it from side to side. And I still have this weird icy feeling going through me. My dog is still growling, and I'm trying to keep her quiet because I'm like, okay, I don't want it to know that we're awake, and I don't know why, I didn't want it to know. But so this passes, and the next morning, early in the morning, as we're all getting up, I'm like, well, I'm just gonna check and see. So the mother and daughter are up, and I asked them. I say, oh, I'm sorry if you guys, weren't feeling well last night. I heard you get up and we're getting into your, medication. Is everything all right? And they said, oh, that wasn't us. We thought that was you. I said, yeah, something was playing with the ibuprofen bottle in my bag. And uh, it was right behind me, like 2 feet behind me. And they're like, oh, it was the ghost of the little boy. And I'm like, yeah, I think it was. So that was one of the strongest paranormal, uh, you know, encounters that I've had. The other one that I will say was very strong and clear was I had the story that I told earlier of my dog chasing off the black bears. So the backstory to that was from my house in Michigan to up to Ely, it's about 14 to 18 hours, depending on how often you have to stop to pee and get gas. So Mackinac City is about 5 hours north of my house. And it's the major crossing point to get into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan that you drive across to go up into Minnesota. So we had stopped at Mackinac City, and my mom was getting fudge for her friends up there. And she had her German Shepherd. I had my miniature pincher. Now, there is a restroom area at the end of the strip of tourist shops, right before you go into the parking lot for the ships that take you over to Mackinac Island. So we had gone into the rest area. I had my little dog with me. And we go into the very first stall, and she gets on my lap, and you know, nothing happens. We leave the stall, wash our hands, we get back on the road. So now fast forward about 3 months later, and I am coming back from Michigan Paragon, which is in the UP. But I had told my dad and my brothers that I would stop and get them fudge and saltwater taffy. Now I do not have my dog with me on this occasion. So I stop and have dinner at this little restaurant, and I get the fudge and the taffy and everything. And I'm like, well, I'm going to use the restroom before I get back on the road because 5 hour drive down. And yes, there's rest areas, but kind of want to, get on the road and just go. So I walk into with my dog, and just as I put my hand, as I'm about to exit the stall, and I put my hand on the handle, a voice clear as day says, "What? No puppy this time?" It was so clear and loud that I answered it back. I said, "No, she's at home." And it was only at that point that I realized something just asked me where my dog was. And there's nobody else in these bathrooms. I checked every single stall. I checked for video cameras. There was nothing. So something in this tourist hotspot of Mackinac City realized and recognized me that I did not have my little dog with me when I stopped in this time. And it was about 3 months after the first, visit there. And it had, questioned me as to where my dog was. And it was so clear. It was so, and I'm like, I walked out of the bathroom. I'm looking around for anybody. I'm like, there are thousands of people who come through this city, this couple of block area, um, every week, and how would they remember me? I mean, yeah, I might be the only one with teal hair and that kind of dog, but really, it's been 3 months and it remembered me. So I have a friend who runs the ghost tours up on Mackinac Island, and I'm telling him about this, and he's like, "Well, it might have been the ghost from here or there." I'm like, "That's not the point. The point is, it asked me where my dog was." And so those were two of the most right there in your face paranormal experiences that I have experienced in recent years that were like, "Yep, uh, I know you guys are there." I'm not debating that at all.
That's wild. From the first experience to the second experience, and to have those up close paranormal encounters, I can't imagine just like sitting there having that, and then to not only just be intrigued with it your whole life, but at the same time just like blown away by that this is happening to you. It's almost as if it's like a connection, or it's like almost like it's a gift in a way. Have you ever thought of it like that?
Well, when I do stop and think about it, I realize that the disembodied voices, I seem to pick up on those more clearly than anything else. And so I think that is, um, you know, a really nice gift to have. And on both occasions when it happened, it really didn't. It wasn't so much a fear. It was that cautionary feeling that you get, like when you just escape a accident or something like that, where you're kind of, you're on alert. And especially with the first, situation where, the rattling of the pill bottle back and forth. But with the second one, it was more, hey, wait a minute, how did you know that? And then trying to disprove it myself, of seeing if somebody else was in the bathroom, seeing if there was a camera, seeing if there was somebody outside the bathrooms who might have recognized me, and from uh, the convention or something else, and being able to disprove all that and being like, oh crap, so something here recognized me, and it knows that I have the little dog, and wants to know where it is, and she's at home. So it's always, you never know um, when and where they will choose to interact with you, but it's always one of those moments where you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so intriguing and fascinating to dive into, especially with paranormal, it being such a heavy outpost with material and what we encounter, what we see, and trying to figure out the answer to it. Um, Before we conclude the show and get moving forward, I wanted to ask you, do you have any particular advice that you would like to give to people out there who are beginners, whether it's cryptid or paranormal, or any insight to those who might go out and investigate cryptid or paranormal?
So my advice is keep an open mind. And even though you're going to go looking for the adventures, most of the time it finds you. And so you can go hiking, you can hike miles and miles on trails and never have a sighting. But you go to turn down a road that you've turned down, maybe, 20 times, and suddenly you see something you can't explain. And that's where your investigation begins. Or you go to a location that really has never had any hauntings or any ghostly activity attributed to it, and you have an interaction or a experience that you cannot explain, and that's where your investigation begins. um people go looking for these encounters, these experiences, but really it finds you. And so that's the frustrating but the rewarding part of it, is never knowing when or where you're going to experience something. So you just kind of have to take with you a curiosity throughout life of what will I experience next, and when I do experience it, how am I going to deal with it, and how am I going to, um, make sense of it? Am I going to dismiss it, or am I going to look for answers and, go and see what I can find?
Very good advice, and I think very informative to those out there, both brand new in both the fields and investigating. Sheaton, before we get going, can you please promote all of your upcoming events, magazine, content wise? Um, I'd love to hear what you got cooking, what's coming up.
Oh my gosh, so much stuff. So I will start off with promoting my three books that I have available right now. The first one is Lake Monsters and Odd Creatures of the Great Lakes. All of these are available on Amazon. The second one is Mothman and Other Flying Creatures of the Midwest. And then the third one is more of a children's book, but it stars my little 7-pound miniature pincher as the lead character. And it's photography that I've done with her. And it's The Marvelous Misadventures of Tegan Gray, and it's Tegan meets Bigfoot. The backstory on it is Bigfoot crashes her tea party, and she wants to know what his problem is. So her and her imaginary friends go on a pursuit of Bigfoot around my yard and finally catch him. And she sets all these different traps and stuff like that. But there is some, there's some, Bigfoot facts that are in it. And she plays private detective and cryptozoologist to find him. And so it's a cute little children's book. Not too scary, but it's definitely real photos of her with her imaginary friends who are puppets and a Bigfoot uh, it's a Bigfoot suit. So those are my 3 books that I have currently available that are cryptozoology. For magazines, I am the managing head writer for Squatch GQ company, and we produce several different magazines. Squatch GQ is more of a fun, kind of lighthearted take on Bigfoot. Squatch Digest focuses on a more scientific approach of evidence collection and stuff of that nature. Watchers magazine is focused on UFOs and alien races, anything to do with outer space or extraterrestrials. And then we have G Hunter, which focuses on ghosts and the paranormal and all things of high strangeness for that. And then we are starting a new magazine that focuses on weird travels and where people can go to potentially go and have a experience with ghost hunting or interesting trails you can hike, gem mining, just things other than going and laying on a beach or skiing down a snow hill, which neither of those really appeal to me. So those are the magazines that I write for. And if you're interested, just follow me on Facebook. We post every time there's a new issue up, we post it on Facebook and promote it. And then for event wise, boy, um, I teach 2 different college courses at 2 community colleges. One is Kellogg Community College in Battle Creek and Hastings, Michigan, and then Owens Community College in Perrysburg, Ohio. At both colleges, I offer a course on the paranormal history of the Great Lakes, and that includes ghost ships, shipwrecks, haunted lighthouses, pirates, sea monsters, or lake monsters, as we will call them, um, devil's triangles that are in each one of the lakes. And the other course that I teach is cryptozoology of North America, and that course I teach primarily at the Owens Community College in Perrysburg, Ohio. And then for event wise, boy, I do a lot. My calendar is almost always full. I think April is the only month that I don't have something going on. But I post all of the events and Zoom presentations that I do on my Facebook page. So if you're interested in seeing me at an event, just check into, especially with 2021, check my Facebook page first, because a lot of events, I don't know if they're still going to run until like maybe 2 weeks before. And then sometimes even, there's a question mark in the air. So that's the best way to keep track of events that I will be at or Zoom presentations that I'll be giving.
Wow, very interesting list of upcoming projects and events. Well, Shetan, I am happy. I was happy to have you on the show. I want to thank you again, and you have a fantastic evening.
Oh, you too. Thank you.